So how did this turn into this, and eventually lead to this? Hi, my name is Gatsby, and I started making video games in 8th grade. It was a lot of fun, and I continued making pixel art for the rest of my life, but at some point in my formative stupid years, I decided to put it down. I was one of those gifted kids, which meant I was smart enough to sound smart, but not smart enough to do anything remotely intelligent. High passive stats, but rolling a d10 for skill checks. So I was under the impression that development, coding, computer science in general was not going to go well for me. So even though I had a decent grip on GameMaker Studio, I gave it up. Not a big deal. I mean, it's not like anybody's ever made a wildly successful hit video game using GameMaker Studio. But no, I went to college to become a teacher instead, and that was a big mistake. I got canned without cause, which is surprisingly legal in Alabama, and one PTSD later, I got a job working remotely for a startup in the games industry. This was a good job. It was a good enough job that if I ever did a bad job, I got really nervous that I was going to lose my good job. And I was working from home, where all my stuff is, which was making it hard to focus, which was making me do a bad job and making me super nervous. All of this was actually just ADHD, by the way, but I didn't know that. I did know, from teaching 8th graders with ADHD, that I might be able to trick my brain into doing work by gamifying my responsibilities, but again, rolling a d10 didn't ever connect the dots. Anyway, I tried this app called Habitica, where the progress is earned not through gameplay, but through completing tasks on your to-do list, which is honestly a pretty sick idea. But it's like it was developed by people who had only ever heard of video games and never actually seen or played one before. You don't actually do anything, you just sort of play dress-up. Guy online, but without friends. So, Guy online. I found myself wondering if this would work better if there was an actual game element to it, and if so, what the game ought to be. So I re-downloaded GameMaker Studio and made a sort of to-do list app that turns your tasks into blocks with, physics and gravity. Yeah, there's not a game here either, is there? But like I said before, writer man, not computer man. And Writer Man has this uncanny ability to create elaborate concepts that justify really bad ideas. WorryWell. Long ago there was a small town, with a small town square, and a small well in the center. The townsfolk called it the WorryWell, and for hundreds of years folks used the well to ease their worries and fears. They would take the thing that was worrying them and write it on a slip of paper, then drop it into the well. The paper would attract a worrywart, a hateful spirit from deep underground, who would swallow the paper, and your worries with it. Then, if you resolved the thing that was worrying you, well... And then I guess you scoop up demon pieces and use them to upgrade the town or something. I don't know. Point is, I'd started this project to try and help myself focus on work, and it was ultimately distracting me from work, so I stopped. I figured it was time to go to the doctor and find out if I had some sort of extremely early onset dementia. Nope. iPad baby brain. All my life, I had known that I was a little bit of a spaz, but I'd chalked it up to the aforementioned anxiety. I hadn't realized that the anxiety was the consequence of trauma, and the trauma was from people saying, just shut up and do it. Stop making excuses. It's not like it's hard. Everybody else did it just fine. With some therapy, I managed to stop being so hard on myself over minor mistakes, especially the ones I could fix. Then I made one of those mistakes at work. No big deal, I can just... You are fired! I wish I could say more. A second helping of PTSD later, and I was looking for work again, but this time, as a changed man, I'd seen the light, been to the mountaintop, and knew that jobs didn't have to be humiliating, demoralizing time sinks. So I tried to find another remote job in the games industry, and despite a resume that was thick with skills that I'd picked up on the job, it didn't matter. I needed a portfolio. I didn't have a portfolio because I didn't have that kind of games industry job. So now that I was unemployed, depressed, anxious, and frequently out of medication due to shortages, I needed something like WorryWell now more than ever. But I'd given up on game design for a reason. It was hard. And I, dumb, anytime I would hit a roadblock, would Google the problem. And one of the three things would happen. I would either A, not even know what to Google, I was so lost. B, find a solution that worked for everyone else but not for me. Or C, talk to an actual real-life human being who was just super rude for no reason. But then, it hit me. We have robots now. Say what you will about generative AI. But the fact that, until recently, game designers have had to learn complex incantations in a variety of hoodoo languages just to make ball go boop is, in fact, stupid. Now, if you're literate, you understand that I didn't just call scripting stupid, and I didn't just call game developers stupid. I called the circumstance stupid. Anyone who learned how to write code the old-fashioned way is and forever will be my superior. But I just want to make the f***ing ball go boop. So this is pretty funny. For all its wonders, AI is still pretty damn dumb. Case in point, I was trying to work in GameMaker, which has its own language, GML. And each project would go great up until Chappy Teagues would forget that little nugget of information and start feeding me C++. Then I'd spend an hour troubleshooting the errors that gave me while the robot scratched its head and shrugged because neither of us were smart enough to know what went wrong where. So I figured, why am I killing myself trying to stick to GameMaker when I could just switch to Unity? After playing around with it for a while, I realized that Unity was going to be capable of handling a lot more than just falling block puzzles. And I started to wonder if this formula was going to be interesting enough to hold the attention of someone like me. The whole upgrading the town bit reminded me of Moonlighter, but that game has dungeons and fighting and stuff. It doesn't have Tetris. So I asked myself, what do I really want to do in a video game? The answer for me is always the same. I want to explore. If there's an area of the map that's visible, I'm going to try to get to it. I don't care if there's monsters or a body of water or an invisible wall. I'm going to waste a lot of my time and what little brain power I have trying to brute force my way over there. That's what makes games like Minecraft so satisfying for me. The game is going to make sure there's always something for me to find, no matter what direction I want to go. But exploration and that sense of adventure was always what I'd felt like Habitica was missing. So I said, hell, let's take a stab at it. I didn't know how to procedurally generate anything. So initially, I had it hooked up to the ChatGPT API and realized pretty quickly that this wasn't practical. But I still wanted a way to be able to fill out the world as you explored it, giving towns random names with NPCs and ongoing stories and stuff, all of which you could only discover and advance through if you did your chores. ChoresQuest. This was once a peaceful, prosperous world, until the brain fog came. It spread itself across the land, petrifying the citizens with task paralysis and robbing them of all their joy. You are an executive of the divine function. It is your job to clear the fog and reconnect the people of this land to one another, no matter the cost. There were problems with this premise that I'll get to later, but I'll be honest, this game was fun. There wasn't actually a game, don't get me wrong. This was at best a toy, but whenever I did chores, that gave me points that I could use to move my dude. And that made me want to do my chores. I don't know what to tell you. I'm a simple man. Anyway, as you've probably noticed, I was trying to tie the game's premise directly to the experience of executive dysfunction, which is an ADHD symptom. If you've ever lost power steering while driving your car, you know what executive dysfunction feels like. Suddenly, the things that you normally don't even think about become nearly impossible to do without tremendous effort. But from the outside looking in, you just look like you're doing it wrong. The problem is, even as far as corny video game plots go, this still doesn't make any sense. Who's doing the chore? Is it the guy? Or is it you? And who are you to the guy? And if he can't move, and you can barely make yourself move, then how is forcing yourself to fold a shirt helping this guy in any way? So I switched it up a little. I decided, okay, the hero isn't the only one who can move. In fact, he's the only one who can't. Cursed ToDo. When dysfunction first arrived in Turstum, it was those nations without heroes that were the first to fall, swallowed by an interminable black fog. What nations did survive did so by way of brave and calculated sacrifice. Harold was just one of those heroes who, to protect the lives of thousands, sacrificed himself instead. By deflecting dysfunction's assault, Harold took a blow meant to wipe out an entire nation, and in doing so was permanently transmuted to a movable stone. Though petrified, Harold remains aware, and retains all the power and knowledge accumulated from a life of adventuring. Through a bargain with the patron, Harold is able to reverse the curse of stone for brief periods of time. The terms of the bargain are simple. Harold has an abundance of motivation, but no magic to reverse the curse. The patron, bound to a world where magic has no function, trades it for the willpower to complete their worldly errands. Ta-da, here it is. And you might have noticed something is different. Basically, I'd gotten bored of making the 2D game, which is stupid because that was working just fine, and decided to remake it in 3D, but mostly with classic 2D assets. Instead of the player interfacing with the fantasy world via this weird television with sticky notes on it, I leaned into the idea of the whole thing being a sort of cardboard or paper diorama that represents Turstum, and the chores would go into his inventory or something. I don't know. At some point, I started having way more fun building this grid-based, tile-by-tile explorable world, and I really think I forgot I was making a to-do list app. A brief aside. If you remember, I started doing this to try and keep myself focused while looking for new jobs. It was not doing that, but it did occur to me that I could use parts of these projects for my portfolio. Psst! That's what this video is for! I also had this idea to make a simpler, much less ambitious version of my Cursed ToDo engine for a little adventure game where you could ask people to give you little pieces of my resume or something like that. Then some things happened. First, I got into this horrible fight with one of my IRL friends and kicked him out of my life. Then, as it turns out, that was the final push I needed to end my D&D game, Bastard Sword. It was circling the drain. My friends seemed to only be playing it to play D&D, and not out of any real interest in the story I had worked to make just for them. And with gone, and with my friend losing interest in D&D in general, I just went ahead and called it quits. But hey, after 9 months of searching, I finally found a job in a prison. This was probably the most humiliating moment of my life, and I once called Aaron Hansen on the phone to ask him to watch my YouTube videos. But after all the things I'd learned and all the things I'd accomplished, nobody wanted to hire me. No one gave a shit. So in the middle of my attempted pivot to a smaller, more manageable project to demonstrate my worth as a professional, I instead found myself utterly devoid of hope, friends, or any kind of future. I think it's safe to say that I enjoyed my 2D, 3D mechanics from Cursed ToDo a little too much. I kept thinking about a link between worlds and how, in order to replicate the classic Link to the Past look from above, they slanted everything backwards. And I was obsessing over it because I checked, and you don't have to do that. If you're using an orthographic camera, all you have to do is put the camera at a 45-degree angle and stretch the image a little bit to make up for the distortion. I'd already made a bunch of these black and white Gen 1 Pokemon-inspired assets, and it kept reminding me of playing Pokemon for the first time. And it really being my first super memorable experience playing a video game at all. I had a lot of the same questions I think other kids did. Why can't I go back up these? Is this a slope? What is this? Why can't I go behind this gym? Why can't I just go around this shrub or climb over it? And I just got to thinking, well, even if I did do that, does that mean I'm the only one who thought of it? Has no one else tried? Why not? Of course, the answers to all these questions are because it's a video game, kid. It's not real. These aren't people. They're little pictures that represent people. For pretend. Wait, hold on. So in A Wrinkle in Time, don't they go to that two-dimensional planet for a second? And then a big part of the book is them trying to understand their experience there. And then there's that folded paper metaphor they use in like every science fiction story, talking about how if there were people that lived on the paper, the three-dimensional travel would look like magic to them. Anyway, that's my Tetris game about doing chores. I got distracted and forgot what I was doing, and now it's an extra-dimensional mystery set in a pixelated Pleasantville that is being slowly digested by a cosmic entity that weakens realities for consumption by isolating its citizens into fractured tribes, none of which see enough of the big picture to understand that they're being eaten while they're being eaten, and it's all just a big metaphor for how having undiagnosed ADHD made me feel like an alien all of my life, only to realize that I've been allowing people without any real education or emotional intelligence to tell me everything I do is wrong. And now that I'm not willing to do that anymore, I'm all alone, growing more and more distant from the only family I ever had, while the looming and totally preventable future that they all told me not to worry about is definitely something we should all worry about and always was. I need a job.